Howdy underlings! Anbernic is a retro handheld company known for making a large variety of gaming devices designed to let people play emulation on the go. They have a tendency to release the same chipset, mostly the H700, in a variety of shapes inspired by other handhelds. Like, you've probably seen the 34XX, the one that looks like a GBA, and the 34XXSP, which looks like a GBSP, or the 28XX, which looks like a GB Micro, if you squint hard enough. But one form factor that they haven't done yet that requires extra special attention is the WonderSwan. It's a handheld made by Gunpei Yokoi and manufactured by Bandai. It's essentially the original Game Boy, but 16-bit. They had color versions as well, but they were ultimately destroyed by the GBA. You might be skeptical of this idea, but I think vertical arcade gamers might like this handheld idea too. Now, I said Anbernic in the beginning, but honestly, any retro handheld company that wants to take a crack at this, who wants to use my idea, it's not exclusively my idea. Other people have thought of a WonderSwan handheld as well, but if you use my specific design, all I ask is that you send me a copy and that you use my name in the name of the device, and that's it. That's all I want. Maybe a link to my channel. That'd be nice. I don't ask for much. Just give me your crumbs. But anyway, the WonderSwan has quite a few games that were never ported, including some decent Digimon games. A lot of these games are also getting translation patches, but the WonderSwan has never been available outside of Japan. I have one myself that you're likely seeing on screen right now. That's an original WonderSwan in the Summer Edition Soda Blue color. The lighting makes it look like anything ranging from blue to green. This system can already be emulated on pretty much every retro handheld, but it has some physical quirks preventing it from being emulated accurately. You're probably already curious about the multitude of buttons. That's because the WonderSwan is a device that, depending on the game, can be played vertical or horizontal, many puzzle games opting for the vertical format. Because of this, the left side of the system has two sets of 4 buttons. The bottom left set is your D-pad for horizontal play. The top is for vertical play. When vertical, the bottom set is also your A and B buttons. On the right side of the device is just A and B. If you play WonderSwan games using a modern device, when you play horizontal, everything is just fine. But when you play vertical, you need to rotate the screen. Since this screen is wider than it is tall, a 14:9 screen, a very weird aspect ratio, the screen would need to be shrunk significantly on anything aside from the RG Cube XX, or I guess just the regular cube in general, the cubes in general. It'd be the same size regardless of the orientation, making this so far the best that we have. The control scheme, however, would be fine. If you rotated the device itself, it would mean no squishing. But then on most devices, you'd be using D-pad controls, but down is right, and right stick would be your new A and B. You can imagine why using an analog stick in place of A and B buttons would suck. So the only practical solution is a handheld with 2 D-pads on the left side. But the D-pads can't both be normal D-pads, not for it to be like, you know, as close as possible. The only one that could function as a normal D-pad would only technically have to be the top one. Then the bottom set would have to be something like standard BAXY buttons. So here's my suggestion. First, use the Swan Crystal form factor. When it comes to collecting WonderSwan, the Swan Crystal and the Swan Color are the most sought after. That's because these didn't have backlights, but the Swan Crystal has such a good screen that it didn't matter that it didn't have a backlight. It's also the last Swan to come out, so there aren't as many available. The Swan Color are only bought because people don't want to buy the Crystal if they were going to replace the screen with a color IPS screen anyway. You don't want to buy the system with the best screen ever just to swap it out with an IPS screen. That's kind of sacrilege. The Crystal also has this futuristic blobby shape. Of course, if it makes the device cheaper, I'd be fine with a rounded rectangular shape with the same dimensions, like the RG28XX but taller. Step 2. Replace the top left buttons with a regular D-pad. When horizontal, up would be up, right, down, down, and left, left. But when vertical, right is up, down is right, left is down, and up is left. It might sound complicated, but it's really just the controls rotated 90 degrees. But you can have a gyroscope in the device to detect when the device is vertical or not. Or maybe a button that changes RetroArch's mapping to vertical mode. Or you could just use the individual game information to choose the control scheme for you, as the WonderSwan did. It was able to tell the difference between games that were vertical or horizontal without the use of a gyroscope. This D-pad would be the main D-pad, unlike the real WonderSwan, which uses the bottom D-pad as its main D-pad. It's better than using the bottom because of the grip. When using the bottom D-pad, you're holding it at the very bottom corners. To make it most comfortable for the most systems, the main D-pad should be at the top. Step 3. Move the bottom right A and B buttons to the top right. Then move the speaker that was there to the bottom right. Add X and Y buttons for SNES and other system compatibility. This would balance out the system and its grip after making the top D-pad the focus. The original WonderSwan is slightly larger than the 28XX. You could make it bigger, but if you make it the same size, please use larger buttons than what you did on the RG28XX. The RG28XX's buttons are uncomfortably small. Instead, use the buttons from the Cube XX. Step 4. The bottom left button should be replaced with the same buttons you used on the right side. These will mostly be unused for everything except vertical games, and could function as additional hotkeys should people want them, like how some people will use the R2 button on Game Boy Color for color palette cycling. But in vertical games, the left button should work as the B and the down button as the A. You could alternatively have a second D-pad. While it might be less ideal, it would be much more surprising. The WonderSwan isn't very well known in the US, so having a second D-pad would definitely result in people talking about it. I can already see the YouTube thumbnails. This handheld has 2 D-pads? Question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point. You get the idea. Also, if it has a second D-pad, that might make it a decent alternative for the PSP analog stick. Step 5. The sound button should be changed to select. The volume button should instead be placed on the left side of the device and sit flush with the housing like the RG28XX. It's important that select, start, and power stay on the front of the device to lend to the aesthetic of the original WonderSwan, Color, and Crystal. The Anbernic logo should be on the front, and don't you dare call it RG something then number XX. Those are terrible name schemes. Instead, call it something based on an animal or an object. It's much easier to remember it that way. You should just rename all your devices to something based off of an animal or an object. It's way easier to remember. But for this, you already know what to call it. The Nova. Step 6. Add shoulder buttons and the R2 and L2 shelf like on the 34XX. This is much more comfortable than the shoulder and trigger buttons on the 28XX. But if that would make it more expensive, then use shoulder buttons that are like the 28XX, I guess. The WonderSwan didn't have shoulders, but this will allow it to play other stuff. Step 7. Bigger screen. And you have 2 options here. 14:9 is the original ratio, which was 224 by 144 pixels. But you could do 3:2 ratio instead, which would also have very minimal borders. I suggest doing 3:2 as this would make it have 1:1 scaling with the GBA. People who like the WonderSwan probably like GBA as well, as many of the ported titles from the Swan were brought over to the GBA. Also, you probably have a bunch of 3:2 screens lying around, and then that way you don't have to get custom ordered 14:9 screens. Step 8. I didn't show this yet, but there's a lump on the back of the WonderSwan, and this is where the battery goes. It also functions as a grip for people who use the bottom controls. If you move the main controls to the top, make the lump bigger or remove it. This could also function as the L2-R2 shelf. This wouldn't provide any additional grip if people are using the top controls, even if you made it bigger. So only add it if you plan to use it as part of the trigger shelf. Also make sure the edges taper to the device's sides, just like the shelf on the 34XX. Step 9, and this is the most important feature, and it absolutely needs this more than anything else, a lanyard loop. You should honestly be putting these on all of your devices already. And that's pretty much it. I don't know how the technical side of this stuff works, but the most important thing about the design is it needs to have 2 D-pads on the left side, and it needs to change its controls when held vertically, either through gyroscope detecting the change, by the game being detected as a vertical game, which is what the Swan did, or by using a hotkey and RetroArch. Most importantly, it needs to be cheap, somewhere in the $30 to $60 area, because you can still easily find the originals online for $80 or more. Mine was $10, but it was broken until I fixed it myself. Since it doesn't have analog sticks and it's similar in size to the 28XX, I don't see it being that expensive. I won't pretend that this is a device that's in high demand. It caters incredibly heavily to people who like the WonderSwan or Game Boy, but no one else has offered this form factor yet, and it could be just weird enough that people would take a crack at it. The collectors would like it for the weird factor, and I can see people who like the GBA but don't like the 28XX's form factor. I can see them being interested in this WonderSwan-like form factor as it's a little bulkier, but I think really it's gonna sell on the weird factor because, like, how crazy does this look? That's all I have for you. Even if you don't use my idea, I'd still appreciate some sort of double D-pad or WonderSwan design in the future. I have an RG Cube, and that will last me long enough until you decide to or not, unless you put a bomb in it or something, but I'd definitely buy another device just for a more accurate experience to the original WonderSwan. Thanks for watching. Bye.